Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to talk to you about the best recordings of Stravinsky's Petrushka. Yes, Petrushka, or The Best Way to Kill a Puppet, which is, of course, what this ballet is about. A miserable puppet who gets killed at the end. It's quite depressing in a toy shop kind of way. Now, there are many, many, many very good recordings of Petrushka. And the reason is because it's enormously popular. It's not terribly long. It's about half an hour long in 4 very elegant sections. And it's incredibly colorful. And the problem with Petrushka, and it does have a problem, is that the ending is a real downer. As I said, at the end, Petrushka gets killed. And so the end, it just peters out into nothingness. It's this, dissonant thing where the ghost of Petrushka is menacing the puppeteer, and the trumpets are going, it's like real nasty. And then it just has a couple quizzical pizzicatos, kind of like the end of Strauss's Also Sprach Zarathustra, and it just goes blank, blank, and it's over. And it really sucks. I got to tell you, it's a terrible ending. And for that reason, actually, I think I have it here. Wait a minute. In this pile of recordings, Stravinsky actually arranged a suite which never gets played. And the reason it never gets played is because, basically the ballet is pretty short anyway, and it has lots of good music until you get to that dismal ending. But I love the suite. I really do. I wish there were more recordings of it, but here is one with Eugene Ormandy and the Philadelphia Orchestra, and it's wonderful, and it has an exciting, loud ending, which is perfect, and it really has most of the best bits of the ballet in it. I don't understand why the suite isn't more popular, but it isn't. Everybody, especially today, with the push for, original everything and first thoughts of this, and people don't like suites and completeness and all that stuff. But if there's ever a ballet that could use a suite, it's Petrushka. But never mind. Now, how does Petrushka die? Petrushka dies by having his tambourine dropped. And this is a big issue, which we need to discuss in detail. And we're going to. In fact, Stravinsky writes in the score, there are 2 versions of this score. The original from like 1911 and then a 1947 revision. And I'm telling you right now, it doesn't make any difference which one you get. It's all the same music. It's all the same shape. The scoring is a little bit different. The revision is scored with a little bit more like clarity and less sort of romantic opulence and harder edges in Stravinsky's later style. The first version's got like more harps whizzing around and a little bit more fulsome sounding and still softer around the edges. I like them both. I don't care which one you get. And other people scream and yell about that, but it's like Bruckner nonsense, As far as I'm concerned, Petrushka is Petrushka. So here is the death of Petrushka. There he is, dying. See right here with the little arrow. Can you see that? Where my finger is? I'm turning this sort of thing around there. See, there's a little arrow pointing at the tambourine part right there. And what that means is he writes, let's see, tenir le tambour de basque tout bas au sol et le faire tomber. Now, in the 1947 version, he translates that into English, which means place the tambourine close to the floor and drop it. And that is the death of Petrushka. And dropping the tambourine has become a major deal with today's modern percussionists because, you don't want to mess up your tambourine, even though it's close to the floor, and what do you drop it on? Nowadays it's very customary to drop it onto a nice cushy pillow, something soft and fluffy, but you don't want it to be soft and fluffy. You want it to go crack, you're killing the puppet, right? And so most percussionists have their everyday utility tambourine here and your formal dress tambourine. This is the one for formal occasions such as, weddings and bar mitzvahs and, funerals if you're in New Orleans, things like that. But I'm going to use my normal tambourine because I'm going to drop the thing. You don't want to like mess up your more deluxe formal tambourine. The deluxe one, comes in this lovely bag. You treat it with a great deal of respect. And this one you just carry around with all the rest of your utility percussion. And Petrushka also, it really has a virtuoso tambourine part. You have to do a lot of thumb rolls. Now, thumb rolls, we use shake the tambourine. You can do that. But if you want, you can shake a tambourine just like that and make a, tambourine shaky sound. Or you can whack it, like that. But the sophisticated, artsy way to play the tambourine is with the thumb, avec le pouce, as they say in French. Mit den Daumen, or whatever it is, or German. What you do is you lick your thumb, and you got to lick it. You use a lot of saliva when you play the tambourine. You lick it, and then you do this. So you just run your thumb along the edge, and you get that nice sound. The trouble is that your saliva dries out pretty quickly, and so the best way to do it is to sort of lube yourself up in advance. You can use this stuff, which is just beeswax or violin bow rosin, anything that's going to make your thumb a little sticky, and that will allow you to, sort of get a little bit more bang for your buck. See, that's it. That's a thumb roll on the tambourine. It's really there's really an enormous amount, there we go, of technique involved in playing the average tambourine. But dropping it, if you drop it on like a nice fluffy pillow, I don't have a nice fluffy pillow here, do I? No, I could use this bag here. And even if you hold it close to the floor, you're going to get sort of like that, a sort of it's just going to sound like your average tambourine twig. So what you really want is a nice hard floor. Yeah! Now that's a dead puppet, right? That sounds great. He says, drop it flat on the floor. But most tambourinists do not like to do that. And in most performances of Petrushka, you will just hear a little sort of clank. And it's so disappointing. I mean, how do you know the puppet's dead? You have to really kill your puppet. So, hard floor. That's the secret. It really is. But I've seen so many performances where they're so careful the way they drop their tambourine. They hold it like a microgram meter off the floor. So it just goes kick. Very, very disappointing. It's only marked piano in the score. I understand it's not supposed to sound like a cannon shot, but it should sound like death. Death by tambourine. That's what it should sound like. All right. Let's talk about recordings. As I said, there are like billions of them, and they're really good. Petrushka, I have to say, technically, I think it's harder to play than The Rite of Spring. I really, really do. And the reason is because in The Rite of Spring, you spend all your time counting, and you can get out of whack. But as long as you're counting eighth notes, basically, in The Rite of Spring, you're going to be okay. And if you miss a note or two, most people don't notice because the idiom is so dissonant and the scoring is so dense that a lot can go wrong before it becomes obvious. At least in terms of pitch, not so much rhythm. But in Petrushka, the rhythms are just as tricky for long stretches. I mean, that opening scene in the Shrovetide Fair, when it's going it's really hard. And the real problem with it is that it's also extremely soloistic. I mean, there are big solos for the English horn, for the trumpet. You have the piano solo. It's a very soloistic piece. And as a result of that, you have to have tremendous virtuosity from the instrumental soloists all the time. And also, unlike The Rite of Spring, there's much more of a folksy, it's based on Russian folk tunes, the whole thing. If you have ever heard Balakirev's Overture on 3 Russian Themes, which I recommend that you go listen to, you will hear primarily that wonderful tune in the last scene, the last tableau. Ya da 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 da, ya da 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 da, da 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 da. That's in the Balakirev. It's a Russian folk song. And there are quite a few of them. And one of the reasons Stravinsky was sort of rejected by the Russians at home was because they felt that he was only gussying up the same Russian folk songs that everybody used in the 19th century for the West and modernizing them. And the acclaim that he got in the West was very offensive to native Russian composers who said, well, we've been doing that, and the only reason he's popular in the West is because they don't know these tunes, and we do. And for that reason, there are no great Russian recordings of Petrushka. Interestingly enough, there really aren't. It's kind of amazing. But so it's a very, very tough piece to play. It really is difficult. And of course, the ending is a letdown, unlike The Rite of Spring, where the ending is the most exciting part. So it really does offer some interpretive conundra. And I think that, the great performances minimize the dullness of the end and highlight all the exciting stuff that happens before that. But it requires a certain, also unlike The Rite of Spring, which is kind of mechanical and you kind of wind it up and let it go, there are these folk tunes, lots of folk tunes. I mean, The Rite of Spring has folk tunes too, but they're fragmented. They're just used here and there to provide a little color, local color. But in Petrushka, they're extended tunes. They're themes. They need to be played with a sort of cantabile warmth and folkishness, if you want to call it that. That became very un-Stravinsky later as he became more neoclassical and more brittle and less emotional. But Petrushka, he hasn't left that all behind yet. And so there's that combination of the extremely toy-like mechanical element and the folk-like vocal element. And it's a very, very interesting blend, a really unique blend in this work. So although there are many really fine performances, there are also a lot of bad ones. There really are. There are a lot that either are just completely cold and uninteresting or that are just a mess. I mean, really a mess. Like one of the big messy ones is, Pierre Monteux's Paris Conservatoire performance, which is just, oh my God, they sound bad. It's just a disaster, but he made up for it. And we'll talk about that in a second. So I'm going to just give you my favorite recordings as usual. These are all really good. No reason to worry about any of them. And there's one of them, I don't have it sitting here, but I just want to tell you. Antal Dorati, who was always a wonderful Stravinskyan, and recorded it twice, once for Mercury Living Presence and then for Decca. Now, sometimes his Mercury Living Presence recordings are better than his remakes, as was the case with the Firebird. But in Petrushka, I like his remake better with Detroit. First of all, it's a brilliant digital recording. Second of all, he uses a mixture of the two versions, which he claims that Stravinsky sanctioned. The problem with the Dorati Petrushka, the Decca one, is that you can't find it anymore. I mean, it's really, really, really out of print. It was issued and reissued and recoupled in various ways, but good luck getting it. So I'm not going to talk about Dorati's Detroit version. The Mercury Living Presence one is quite good. But let's talk about all these others, because I've got, who knows, a dozen or more, a bit more. First, Pierre Boulez with the New York Philharmonic. Boulez uses the original version, which is kind of fun, not the 47 remake. It's a brilliant, wonderful performance. I prefer this to his later remake on Deutsche Grammophon, although that's very good too. Boulez was always a good Petrushkian. And so this is on Sony, and it's perfectly fine. Next, Esa-Pekka Salonen. Now, of course, I've said a million times his Stravinsky is absolutely first rate. He was a great Stravinsky conductor because he conducts with all that necessary pinpoint precision, a little on the cool side, but it's okay. And, his early Stravinsky ballets, like all of his Stravinsky, are just great. If you don't have the Stravinsky box, it's, of course, out of print, it seems to be. But you can get it as a digital download, I think, still. It's a possibility. It's 7 discs, and it's as great a set of Stravinsky performances as you'll hear from anybody. It really is. Here's a real sleeper. This is an archivemusic.com reissue of a Japanese RCA, and that's Levine with the Chicago Symphony. If you want to hear the way Reiner would have done Petrushka, I mean, a fabulous, virtuosic Chicago Symphony performance, Levine is the one to get. This is a knockout. In terms of execution, I don't think it's ever been better done. I really don't. And it's coupled with an absolutely fabulous Les Noces. I talked about this recording when we discussed Les Noces. It's simply amazing. So if you can still get it, and you probably can get it from archivemusic.com or somehow, this is one of those discs, my God, it never should have gone out of print. It's wonderful. You know, and BMG would really ought to do a Levine RCA box. Wouldn't that be great? Except for the fact that Levine is now like, persona non grata for, reasons we don't need to go into. It's such a shame because there's such a fabulous legacy on RCA of these early Levine performances, and this was one of them. Absolutely. Next, let's see. Well, which one's this? Colin Davis with the Concertgebouw. Now, Colin Davis's Stravinsky is a little weird. Some of you really like his Firebird. I like his Firebird. It's very, very beautifully played. A little bit on it has its dead spots here and there. And his Rite of Spring, he always did the end very strangely, the very end. When it goes, thud, at the end, he sort of does, tweep, thud. He had his quirks when he conducted Stravinsky. Petrushka is probably the best of his 3 Stravinsky ballet recordings, largely on account of the fact that A, he keeps it moving, and B, you've got the Concertgebouw, which plays gorgeously, and they're fabulously recorded. So Colin Davis on what used to be Philips and is now Decca, if you can find it, always with that proviso, is absolutely superb. Also superb, Claudio Abbado with the London Symphony Orchestra. His best recordings were all made with the London Symphony Orchestra. And his Stravinsky was fabulous, absolutely fabulous. His Petrushka is gorgeous. This was an early DG digital. And I remember it came out at the same time as the Dorati digital one. They were on Decca because in those days, remember, they were separate labels and they could all go do their own thing. And it's really beautiful. Absolutely beautiful, fabulously well played, detailed, not excessively fussy, nicely recorded. I think the Dorati sounded better. I really do. But Abbado's Stravinsky is just first class, these DG recordings. And it's a terrific Petrushka. So there you go. Back to the Concertgebouw, we have Shai and the Concertgebouw. If you can't find Colin Davis, get Shai because you have just as fabulous an orchestra, possibly even better sonics. It's 6 in one, a half dozen in the other, and it's a brilliantly exciting, colorful, characterful performance. Also con amore, a little bit of love, a touch of schwung to the melodies. It's really nice. It's a beautiful performance. It's coupled here with the complete Pulcinella, which I love. I mean, I love Pulcinella. Of course, Abbado did a fabulous complete Pulcinella too. We'll have to talk about Pulcinellas at some point. But this is a fabulous Petrushka. All of Shai's Stravinsky ballets too were with Cleveland and with the Concertgebouw were just superb. Absolutely superb. Another, amazing Stravinsky conductor and Petrushkian was Bernstein, and he did it twice. New York Philharmonic and Israel Philharmonic. Now, his Israel Philharmonic stuff sort of got crapped on because they were sort of screechy early digital recordings. They sound better in this mastering for some reason. But I liked his Israel Phil Stravinsky because it was a little bit slower, a touch less exciting, but sort of dry and clean and crisp. And he didn't go for his like slow, slobbery stuff that he sometimes did later on. However, the New York Philharmonic one is nothing to sneeze at. This was always one of the great Petrushkas, and it still is. It's the 1947 version, by the way. He always did that one, the revision. People say that Stravinsky did the revision just for copyright purposes. And that was one reason he did it. But I also think that the update in style was typical of him and logical. But now we come to my top 3. My top 3 Petrushkas. Oh, I love these performances. First, as you might expect, Karel Anschel with the Czech Philharmonic. This is the Denon Superfun one, but they were also available on Superfun. This is the performance that really captures that wonderful Russian folk element, even though it's Czech, the Slavic tang in the music. You've got a great, great orchestra, a conductor who is amazing in contemporary music. It is as sharply rhythmic as you want, but it always sings. It's so beautiful. It's so carnivalesque. It has such a sense of the theater, of the atmosphere and ambience of the piece. You really, really get that character of it that, frankly, I don't think any other performance captures it so well. In some ways, it's the most idiomatic Petrushka you'll ever hear. It's absolutely gorgeous. And this and The Rite of Spring with the Czech fill, these two performances, you really have to have. You don't really know these Stravinsky works unless you've heard these performances. And I have to be honest and say there are no Russian performances that come anywhere close to these in terms of just that feeling of authenticity. It's kind of interesting, but there it is, right? I mean, I know Russian people may have a nervous breakdown about that, but that's really how I feel about it. At least that's what the discography tells me. And I've heard a lot of the discography. Next, Pierre Monteux redeems himself with this fabulous Boston Symphony Petrushka. You know, Monteux conducted all these things, the original performances of these things. And so you really do want to have a Monteux performance if you can, just like The Rite of Spring and Daphnis and Chloe and all that stuff. This also has his Rite of Spring, his Boston Rite of Spring, which is in mono, and which is also excellent, absolutely excellent. But boy, this Petrushka absolutely is perfectly also idiomatic, authentic sounding, fabulously well played, beautifully recorded. It's an RCA living stereo. Yay! Just great. Just great. Monteux was such a terrific conductor. And I think it's just so valuable to have the guy who did the premiere who lived long enough to make these wonderful stereo versions. And, you know, as Monteux got older, he didn't slow down. He didn't change at all. He really didn't. I mean, he's just as perky and neat and precise and warm and genial as he was in his earlier days, at least to the extent that the recordings document that. And so the Monteux Boston Petrushka is definitely one you want to hear. However, if I had to pick one, and I always have to pick one, don't I? My choice for combination of fabulous idiomatic approach, authenticity, warmth, precision, rhythmic dazzle, instrumental virtuosity, and general knowing their way around the piece is Ozawa in Boston. Now, you know, I mean, Ozawa always gets trashed for some reason. I don't know. There is some music he did incredibly well. And one thing he did really well was French music. And the Boston Symphony, because of its history under Koussevitzky and Monteux and all these other conductors, Munch was the great French orchestra, especially after the Paris Conservatory disappeared in the 60s. And, you know, they really, even then, they played with a virtuosity that was incomparable. And this Petrushka, you know, you have that fabulous contemporary rhythmic sharpness and clarity that Ozawa brings to the table with an orchestra steeped, immersed, drowning in the Stravinskyan tradition of performing this music and the French elegance, the French idiom. I mean, everything about this performance conspires to give us just about the perfect, ideal Petrushka. That's Ozawa and the Boston Symphony. That's my pick. It may not be yours. You can tell me what your picks are. But I got to tell you, you know, this is one of those pieces, because so much of it is sort of mechanical music. If it's played correctly and rhythmically and properly, it's going to go well. It's really going to go well. And as long as the death scene, you know, this business, here we go. As long as you do this, ooh, and kill the damn puppet, then it's going to sound just fine. So that is my recommendation for Petrushka. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. You owe it to yourself. If you don't owe it to me, that's another issue. It's a joy talking to you about these performances. Keep on listening, folks. Thank you, and be well.